Happy Monday, everybody. We have got a lot of stuff to cover from last week, so buckle your seatbelts because, wow. So starting off the nonsense, the Trump administration has effectively removed the T from LGBT from all government websites and any mention anywhere, specifically the Department of State's travel advisory website that literally informs people from the LGBTQI+ community about the dangers of traveling overseas in certain countries, because once again, the Trump administration and Republicans are absolutely terrified of transgender people. Boo. In a leaked memo from the Department of Defense, we also learned they put out an order to the DoD and all of its subsidiary agencies and offices to stop celebrating any marginalized communities' holidays or recognizing them whatsoever. So that means they cannot spend any federal tax dollars or use any man hours to celebrate things like Black History Month, Women's History Month, Pride Day, pretty much any of them, and there are quite a few. These are nationally recognized holidays that are no longer allowed to be recognized by federal employees that fall within the DoD, and I'm sure it's going to spread beyond the Department of Defense to other agencies as well. So we have that. In the early days of this administration after the inauguration, we've seen a lot of things like the removal of high-ranking officers, high-ranking officials within the federal government, removing a lot of staff, hiring freezes, and all kinds of things that are damaging to federal agencies like the FAA. And this last week, we also saw two of the most tragic events in aviation we've seen in a very long time. And when the press pushed Donald Trump to answer for all of the horrible policies the Trump administration has put in place that ultimately led to these accidents, the Trump administration and Trump himself blamed DEI. Because, why the hell not? The Trump administration loves using DEI in place of the N slur because they know they can't say the N slur yet. But they use DEI instead. So they're blaming brown people and marginalized people for these horrible, tragic aviation accidents because that's just what the Trump administration loves to do. Moving right along, we now have to look at the devastation that's coming from the trade wars that have been initiated by the Trump administration. Trump's threats to place 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada and an additional 10% tariff on China are causing all kinds of havoc in the US markets and the global markets overall. So watching the stock markets fluctuate wildly last week during the time that we were understanding these threats were coming, the threat of tariff was actually going to happen, and then watching the futures market over the weekend plummet below 600 points in a single day, and even further by the time I went to bed last night, Sunday, and then waking up this morning to watch the markets open and realize pretty much all of those losses. Average Americans who are saving in vehicles like Roths and 401ks and other stock options and things like that to prepare for their retirement or save for later in their life are seeing actual losses when they woke up this morning to the new markets. This is a devastating factor of this administration, and it's only going to get worse. Over the weekend, we also watched a lot of protests due to this mass deportation, this immigration initiative that this administration has had come to fruition. We've watched makeshift ICE detention facilities get put up and built in cities all across the United States. We even had one here in the local Austin area in the city of Pflugerville, which is a suburb of Austin, where there were protests because we found out it existed that literally shut down all the operations of that ICE detention facility and the ICE agents that were assigned to go out there and start raiding different facilities like schools, places of worship, businesses, all kinds of other entities that they're going into and trying to pick up people. Moreover, we've discovered that they're not just detaining people who are undocumented in this country, they are detaining citizens, US citizens, specifically children, or other people who are US citizens that just didn't match the profile of being white and blue eyes and blonde hair. And, they're being detained because they don't have their papers. This has a very historical kind of parallel to it if you really look into it. And worse off, we've got DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, run by Elon Musk, a drug-addicted moron, who's now going in with a bunch of children that he's brought in from across the country and even Canada, and I mean children, to start accessing systems they have no business accessing that are highly classified, highly confidential payment systems, things like the Social Security payments, disability payments, veterans payments, military retiree payments, pensioners, all kinds of stuff that they're looking for, and moreover, things that are going to other agencies that receive money from the federal government, both here in the country and outside of the country. They're going after these systems, trying to stop these payments to alleviate $2 trillion from the deficit, which they're not going to be able to do without essentially destroying people's lives. But I understand they don't care about that. But that's what's happening. And here's the funny part about it. It's impacting a very unlikely group that we never thought it was going to impact. So the Christo-nationalist, far-right Christian entities that voted for the Trump administration to be the new president are now the ones that are on the chopping block. So they are going in trying to cut all payments to certain sections of these Christian nationalists and removing all the federal tax money that they've been getting for their outreach programs. So I think specifically they're targeting the Lutheran Church, amongst others. I don't think the Lutheran Church is the only one they're targeting, but that's been the one that's in the news the most. So that's kind of the recap of everything we've been able to go through over the last week. I'm sorry if this was a huge downer for you, but you need to be informed. You need to understand what's going on in this administration, and I want to be able to help you do that. Oh, and one last thing. The administration that ran its entire political campaign on lowering gas prices and lowering prices at the grocery store has seen record increases in prices at gas and at the grocery store. We've seen produce go up almost 100% across the United States. A little thing of cherry tomatoes is like $6, and eggs are now somewhere around $10 to $13 a dozen. So what exactly did y'all fucking vote for?